Are you Jewish? Are you Jewish? Are you Jewish? Are you Jewish? The Lubavitchers parked their mitzvah tank at the corner of my college post office. Remember those? And posed this question repeatedly, like a jingle, to students passing by. In the early 90s, Yale was about 25% Jewish. So asking, "Are you Jewish?" was like shooting fish in a barrel. Most of my Jewish friends were accosted multiple times each day. But not one time in 4 years did they ever ask me. I would have liked some free Shabbat candles, or to sit in their makeshift sukkah, or to have been acknowledged even once as a member of the tribe. And the Orthodox weren't the only ones who didn't recognize me as Jewish. I led the Reform Minyan. I chanted Torah. I read the entire liturgy in Hebrew, all while wearing a tallis. But inevitably, someone would come up afterward and ask, "Are you Jewish?" I know what you're thinking. But Rabbi, surely you understand there's a Jewish look, and you don't exactly have it. Jews are a people with Jewish last names, Jewish features. We even have our own genetic diseases. Yes, I did understand what the Jewish community was telling me. That Jewish peoplehood was akin to a race, something immutable and hereditary, an exclusive club you had to be born into. And even though I had a Jewish father, with this face, I would never really be Jewish. Jewish peoplehood is powerful and real, but too often we misunderstand what that means. So tonight, I want to debunk some of the myths around Jewish peoplehood. Beginning with, first, we Jews are not a race. The earliest biblical reference to the Israelite people as a race is made by Pharaoh in Egypt. He used it to justify our enslavement and to kill our firstborn. He stoked racist fear that the Israelites would grow to outnumber Egyptians and rise up against them. Pharaoh's message to his subjects echoes through the centuries: Jews will not replace us. And the first historical articulation of Judaism as a race was during the Spanish Inquisition. And even those Jews who converted to Christianity were still considered to have polluted, impure Jewish bloodlines. And later, in an effort to dehumanize Jews, the Nazis used pseudoscience to claim that Jews had identifiable racial features and a genetic propensity towards certain behaviors and beliefs. The notion of Judaism as a race is a construct created by our enemies to justify anti-Semitism, violence, and even genocide. And yet, we Jews still cling to this idea of race, that there's a genetic blueprint, a look that makes us what we are. But that's another myth. Jewish peoplehood is not about a pure Jewish bloodline or survival of one strand of DNA. We Jews have never been just one color or one cluster of chromosomes. When the Torah first calls us a people coming out of Egypt, we are described as an Erev Rav, a mixed multitude. And when we were exiled from Jerusalem over 2,000 years ago, we spread out to every imaginable corner of the world. Jews went to India and Yemen, Russia, China, and Ethiopia. The majority of Jews in Israel today are not Ashkenazi, but Jews of color from Middle Eastern, African, and Asian countries. And in America, while many think of Jews as white people, even that assumption is outdated. In 2019, the first Jewish population study to measure Jews of color in America found that Jews of color represent at least 12 to 15% of American Jews, and it's only growing. That's a stunning statistic. It's about 1 in every 7 Jews. It means that out of approximately 7.5 million Jews of America, about 1 million are Jews of color. 1 million. Let me guess. You're thinking, I don't believe that. I don't see them anywhere in my Jewish community. And you're right. On this Yom Kippur, we should do some soul searching and ask why that is. After a black rabbinical student preached from Central's pulpit this summer, Robert, a black congregant in his 20s, had the courage to reach out and tell me about his experience here. He said that the first time he walked into Central, a security guard trailed him inside and watched him suspiciously. He almost didn't return after that. But he did. And while he loved coming to Shabbat services, back when you could actually, come to services, he said he faced questions from congregants every single week. What neighborhood are you from? Who are you here with? And the ubiquitous, are you Jewish? We might hear Robert's story and excuse our community response as awkward inquisitiveness, well-meaning curiosity. But just imagine that this was Robert's experience walking into, say, Bergdorf Goodman. He's regarded with suspicion the minute he walks in the door. And too many people asking, "Can I help you?" with the assumption that he does not really belong. Now, we would clearly see that as racism. But we don't see this behavior as racist when we do the exact same thing to him in synagogue, based on the color of his skin. I don't think it's overt racism that prompts a congregant to ask an Asian mother in our lobby if she is the babysitter, or to ask a black congregant to take their drink order at a bar mitzvah reception. But the impact of this is undeniable. Jews of color experience racism in our community. Now, if you look Jewish, you've never been asked these questions. They only get asked of strangers. And because Jews of color hear these questions every time we walk into a Jewish community, that's exactly how we feel. Like a perpetual stranger. It's exhausting. We are in the midst of a national discussion about race and racism in America that is long overdue. On this holiest day of atonement, there may be no more important accounting we each need to make than to examine our own racial assumptions and prejudices. The Jewish community needs to see the fight against racism in our country as our fight. But tonight, I focus on racism within our own Jewish community. Because as a rabbi, I have to clean my house first. And as one who thinks about Jewish survival far too much, I know if we don't fundamentally rethink our tribal, racial notion of Jewish peoplehood, we are sunk. The demographic trends are inevitable. We will lose future generations of Jews and their children and be the poorer for it. I remember a meeting with an interfaith couple before their wedding. The bride was a Southern-born Protestant who grew up going to church every Sunday. She was intrigued by Judaism and open to conversion. She asked her fiancé, "What does being Jewish mean to you?" He replied, "I'm not that religious. Judaism is more my culture and identity. It's the feeling that I can walk into a party and just pick out the Jews in the room." She looked at him, and so did his Asian rabbi. "So would you pick us out in the room?" I asked. That couple got married, but she never converted. Letting go of the idea of a Jewish race is difficult because there's a real comfort in expecting that we can pick out our own. And there's pride in feeling that there's something inherited, even divinely ordained, about Jewish chosenness. But making our identity a tribal race is not only exclusive, it's dangerous. Because, and here I want to debunk one final myth, race is not scientific. Geneticists and anthropologists agree that race is a man-made invention with no real basis in science or biology. Further, anthropologist Ashley Montagu writes, "The idea of race was the deliberate creation of an exploiting class seeking to maintain and defend its privileges." Or as Ta-Nehisi Coates bluntly says, race is the child of racism, not the father. Now, this idea is brilliantly fleshed out in Isabel Wilkerson's groundbreaking new book, Caste. She convincingly shows how race has been manipulated to create hierarchies of human value, to assert the supremacy of one race over another. Whether it was blacks in America, untouchables in India, or Jews in Nazi Germany. The pillars of caste systems were remarkably similar across time and geography. For example, did you know that when Hitler created his caste system in order to exterminate the so-called Jewish race, the Third Reich actually studied America's race laws for ideas? Yale law professor James Whitman wrote that in the 1930s, the United States was, quote, "the leading racist jurisdiction in the world." Nazi lawyers, as a result, looked very closely at and were ultimately influenced by American race law, end quote. In particular, Nazis admired the Jim Crow era laws that discriminated and segregated Black Americans from white Americans. They adopted America's anti-miscegenation laws prohibiting interracial marriage also. But banning Jewish and Aryan marriages posed a special problem for the Nazis because at the time, intermarriage rates were already over 60%. And with interracial children, it was hard to define who was Jewish and who was not. So the Nazis again borrowed from the American obsession with categorizing race by fractions of perceived ancestry. In 1890, the United States Census included racial categories for those who were a quarter Black, a quadroon, or even an eighth Black, octoroon. You could be 1/16 Black with a drop of Negro blood, and you were considered Black. As I said, race is not scientific. Germany's Nuremberg laws ultimately defined a Jew as anyone with at least one Jewish grandparent, regardless of religious practice. For the Nazis, even conversion to Christianity couldn't overcome Jewish ancestry. Through these laws, the Nazis established a caste system that put Jews at the very bottom, as Untermenschen, subhuman. This dehumanizing view of Jews was critical in enabling the Nazis to persuade Germany and much of Europe to participate in or stand by and watch the murder of 6 million Jews by the end of the war. It was a caste system the Nazis created in great part by studying the legal caste system we created for Black Americans. Now, after World War II, when the State of Israel was founded with a mission to take in Jewish refugees, Israel, incredibly, adopted the Nazis' one-quarter Jewish ancestry definition as the foundation for defining who was eligible for the law of return. I was taught the reasoning was, if it's enough Jewish blood to get you killed, it would be enough Jewish blood to get you saved. But why did we allow a racial definition imposed by our enemies to become our benchmark for who is a Jew? Yes, heredity is important and meaningful. It's powerful to imagine an ancestral line of Jews that goes all the way back to Sinai. But it is time to stop thinking of Jewish peoplehood as a race once and for all. Instead, think of us as a family. You can become family by birth, adoption, and choice. You can create a bond stronger than blood through covenant, as we do in marriage. The Jewish Brit, our covenant with God, is how we all became family. Because the foundation of Jewish peoplehood doesn't come from myths about race, but from our covenant with God. Tomorrow we'll read about this Brit in our Torah portion. Listen to who is included. Atem nitzavim kulchem. You stand, all of you, before God. Leaders and laborers, grown-ups and children, the stranger and convert, into this sworn covenant I make with you today. Instead of defining Jewishness by having the correct fraction of Jewish blood, let every Jew who feels bound by this covenant be seen and counted equally as part of the Jewish people, just as God does. A few years ago, I was walking on the Upper West Side on Broadway, and there was a mitzvah tank parked on the corner. I saw a boy, not yet bar mitzvah age, in a black hat and suit. But as I hurried past, he stepped right in front of me, looked me straight in the eye, and asked, "Are you Jewish?" I stopped in my tracks. He was seriously asking me. I had to hold myself back from my enormous urge to embrace the boy. "Yes," I said excitedly. "Yes, I am Jewish. Thank you very much." The young boy, confused by my passionate response, shrugged his shoulders and offered me a box of candles. "Happy Hanukkah," he said, and walked away. The boy thought nothing of it, but I've replayed that moment many times since. It was my Hanukkah miracle. He gave me a taste of a Jewish peoplehood that was beyond race, where the color of my skin, the shape of my features, were no longer the markers of my belonging or authenticity. In that young Chassid's question was a revolutionary assumption, one that could truly change the world, that he could see me and imagine me as part of the same family.